Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here, videocopilot.net, and welcome to a very exciting tutorial. And this time I'm not messing around, all right? 2008, we had some fun, right? But now let's get serious. So what we're talking about is the Video Copilot SureTarget preset. Now, this tool is going to be used to help you animate the camera inside of After Effects 3D space more fluidly, more dynamically, and with greater ease than ever before. And if you act now, I will make your third payment absolutely free. Here's an example of what you can achieve. Okay. Now, I recommend you check out the Video Copilot Advanced Camera Tips tutorial. Now, this shows a really good setup for creating cool animations inside of After Effects. Now, it's important to understand the principles of this type of animation, so if you're working on a project in the future, you'll know what the limitations are of the SureTarget tool and what you can achieve with manual controls in After Effects. So check that one out, and also check out the speed particles. That one's pretty good too. Completely unrelated, but why not? Now, before we go on to creating a cool design and actually doing something that looks good, let's go and take a quick look at what the preset is actually doing and what to expect. So, in a nutshell, whatever that means, I assume that means that if you were to write down what I'm about to explain to you on a piece of paper and you crumbled it up, it should fit inside of a nutshell in order to be in a nutshell. So first thing you want to do is download the preset. So it's in the project for the tutorial you are watching, not this tutorial, but the one you're watching. And then what you want to do is go into your After Effects directory and install it by just copying it into the presets folder. So go After Effects, support files, presets, and just copy it in there. Restart After Effects, and there you go. Okay, let's start by making some text. So I'm just going to type first and second and, of course, fourth. What happened to the third one? I was just trying to change it up a bit. So we'll go ahead and make these 3D layers. So we'll turn on the 3D layer switch. Then we'll create a new camera. 35mm should work well. And then we're going to create a null object. Now, SureTarget works best when applied to a null object. Now, the null object can be named anything, but we'll just go and call it SureTarget. And we'll make it yellow. And we'll parent the camera to the null object. So if you check out that tutorial, this is kind of the basic setup where you animate the null object, you fly it around rather than moving the camera directly. So that's good, but let's go ahead and see what we can do with the SureTarget. So making sure that the SureTarget null is a 3D layer, what we're going to do is move our 3D text around. So we'll put our first one out in front. By the way, we can use the custom view just to quickly move these around. And that should work okay. And let's take the second one and just rotate it to the left. Hold down Shift so that the rotation is 90 degrees. And that way we can play around with that. Now, SureTarget. Here's how you do it. So you have this scene set up, and you have these different locations. So what we want to do is be able to animate between them. So in your effects and presets, we're going to type SureTarget, and there is the preset, and we're going to drop it onto the SureTarget null. Okay, nothing's happened yet, but we do have all of these effects. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of go through them. First, we have the SureTarget slider, and that basically allows you to slide between the targets 1 through 10. So 1 means you're on target 1 and so forth. Wiggle That's just going to give a little bit of random movement to the position. We're probably going to ignore that for right now. Now, here are the important parameters, the targets. Now, these are not characters from a movie where futuristic cyborgs get sent back in time. No. Instead, these are our targets. And if we toggle them down, they basically allow you to select a layer. Now, by default, the target is selected, but we're going to change that to our layers, or it could be any other 3D object in your scene. So for the first layer, we'll choose the first title, which happens to be layer 5. For the second, we'll go ahead and go to the second, and for the third, logically, we will click on the fourth. Now, once these are set up, the camera can now maneuver and fly to these different spots. You can also go into the other targets and add in layers that you've already used before. Say we want to come back to the very first one. It's a logo and we want to start on it, go get our message, and then come back to it at the end. We'll just add it into the queue. Now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead, bring down the effects and the sure target. And right now it's set to 1. We'll go ahead and set a keyframe. We'll move forward. I'm going to zoom in. We'll move forward 1 second and we'll set another keyframe. So between this time, we're just going to be locked on number 1. And then I'll move forward another second, and then we'll type in 2. So that instantly takes us to the second target where our text is just slightly rotated, and we'll address that in just a moment. So we'll go in to the second, we'll go to the 3-second mark, set a keyframe, to the 4-second mark, change it to 3, and now we're on the third title. Man, I'm just going to confuse me. Wasn't even that funny. More of a waste of time. So, back to it. Now we can see first, second, third. And we'll go ahead and hold on the third one and set a keyframe. And what the heck, we'll go ahead and come all the way back to the first one by clicking on 4. So, first, second, third, and back to the beginning. Now, if you do 1 instead of 4, it's going to do something probably unexpected. And what it's going to do is basically go back to every single place it came before. And that's because we're hitting all of those targets along the way. So when we go from 3 to 1, we're hitting on 2 and then back to 1. So usually you don't want to do that, so make sure you set it up in the queue here so that they come one after another. So what we can do now with this setup is first we can select the keyframes, right click, and set it to easy ease. You can also hit F9, and that will make the animation between these layers very fluid, very smooth. And I'm also going to go ahead and set up a particle system so we can actually see the movement. So we'll create a new solid, make comp size, and we'll call this particles. Okay. And then we'll do simulation particle world. And real quick, we'll just set it up. We'll set it to off here. Physics, we'll go ahead and turn the velocity to 0 and the gravity to 0. And the particle type, we'll set to faded sphere. And then we'll increase the producer radius so that we just have a big square of particles. And then make it 3D. We'll make the life of the particles maybe 3 seconds. And just, we'll change the color here just to blue or something. And what the heck, while we're here, make a quick colored background, generate ramp. We'll do radial, blue, and we'll go over this a little bit later. I just want to show you. I know you're dying to see. So am I. I hope this thing works. It'll be embarrassing if it doesn't. Okay. So bringing up the sure target keyframes, hit U, and now we can see what this animation is going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and squeeze our animation down a bit just so it's a little quicker. And then we can watch it. So I'm going to hit 0, check it out. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, we are coming to this other title which isn't quite looking at the camera. So I'm going to lock our particles and we'll just rotate this away again. And what you want to do is keyframe the orientation of the null object while it's moving. So we're going to go ahead and line up right at the beginning of this animation. So here we'll hit R, Shift R, and that brings up the orientation along with anything else that's already up. We'll keyframe the orientation. We'll move forward, and we take the null object, and we're going to rotate it on the y-axis. And that's going to rotate it so that we can see the second title. Then we'll move forward, set another keyframe, and when the camera moves away, we'll go ahead and animate it back out. So change this back to 0. Now I'll go ahead and take these orientation keyframes and hit F9 so that those are easy ease curves also. So what's going to happen as the camera animates, it's going to rotate to the next title, and then it's going to rotate back out as we go to the third title. So this is the basic idea, is being able to easily control the position and then make secondary animations like the rotation and things like that. Now what's so cool about the preset is it's all dynamic. So say I want to move our second target. Well, I can just select that text layer, say move it up, and you can see relative to the other spots, the camera is moving. But the animation stays the same. The animation simply travels further and then back down. So like even this third one, we can maybe even move it further away or move it down, and the animation automatically updates based on where everything is. So it's very cool. And real quick, just to get some of the technical stuff out of the way, if you want to reposition where we're looking, so right now the camera's looking right at the bottom of the first title. We'll just take the title, take the pan behind tool, and simply move the anchor point of the target layer and put it wherever you want. Now, scale and rotation are not affected by the Sure Target, just the center position. So if you move it around and give it a little bit more dynamic look, that's okay. We'll go and fly to the next title. Again, we can take the pan behind tool and adjust it to put it where we want it to be. And finally the third title. And then we can turn on some motion blur. Now you can add the wiggle through the Sure Target preset, but that's just going to move the actual target. So it'll look something like this if you do it that way. But I actually like the look of hitting P, bringing up the position of the camera, alt-clicking, and then typing wiggle here, maybe 0.25, 250. And for any of those who are not familiar with the wiggle expression, it's a way to randomly generate movement. And it says 0.25 times a second, it's going to animate 250 pixels. So it's random between those ranges. So if I go ahead and play that back, you see what we're talking about. Okay, so pretty cool. You can see, this was a very easy way to set up an animation, and more importantly, you can customize it. Let's go ahead and move on to creating a design that actually looks halfway decent. And now just analyzing the animation, we can break it up into individual elements. We have these blocks, we have the particles, we have this little line thing, and we have the lens flares that are sort of flickering on and off. So what we're going to do is go and build those individual elements and then put them together in a nice title. So we'll go ahead and create a new composition. And we'll use the widescreen square pixel comp. We'll make it 15 seconds long and 24 frames per second. Okay. And then we'll go and create a new solid and make it comp size, choose OK. We'll add that same ramp effect, generate ramp. We'll make it blue, dark blue, and we'll go with radial, and we'll bring this down a little bit. And the next thing we want to do is build the block background that you see here, so sort of random flickering blocks. So we'll create a new solid. Now to make this simple, we want the layer to be a square. So what we'll do is we'll make the width 500 by 500 pixels. Now it can be done, with another layer, but you're just gonna have to fine tune the settings, and not today. We're gonna add a fractal noise, and then we're gonna go ahead and go search for mosaic. Now the mosaic filter basically kind of gives you a blocky result, and it's automatically set to 10 by 10. Now if you're not familiar with this plugin, it's one of the most popular ones available, and it's used often for creating blurred out faces. So here's kind of a good example. And what you might also notice if you're ever watching the news is they sometimes make the blocks very, very small so you can actually see who that person is. And I think they do that intentionally. I think they just kind of want people to know who that is, but then say, well, we did our best to block it out. Well, I think you and I both know that this guy right here is Sam Loya. And anyway, back to it. So we add the mosaic, and then we just have perfect colored blocks. Then effect, and we're going to go down to generate grid. And so this creates a grid. Well, look at this. It's exactly the right size as our mosaic. So what we can do is set the blending mode to stencil alpha, and that will basically use the background. But if we invert it, then what we're doing is getting rid of the edges so that we increase the border, and now we have this kind of cool, I don't think it's that cool, but it's kind of retro. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and animate the evolution. Alt-click on the evolution, and we're going to type time times 250, and this is just a quick expression that multiplies the current time times 250. So as it goes along, the value increases over time, and we get sort of a self-propelling animation. Now, we want to increase the contrast here, turn on sharp color. Okay, let's change the color of this to blue, and that way we know this is our blocks. Then let's go ahead and create that animating line. So we'll shut that off. We'll make a new solid, comp size, and we'll make this green. And we'll do effect, generate write on. And the write on filter allows you to create some sort of hand drawn animation things, different stuff like that. We're going to alt click on the brush position. So alt click, and we're going to type wiggle 3,300. So 3 times a second, the pen is going to run around 300 pixels approximately. So you can see we've created sort of this random drawing. And then we'll set the length to 2.5 seconds, 2.5 there. And we'll bring the brush spacing all the way down so that we have kind of a filled in line. And we might even bring this down to 250 so it's not as large. And that's kind of long. How about 2 seconds? Still kind of long? 1 point, or better yet, let's just make the speed 2. And finally, we'll change it to on transparent. And that way we can see it there. Now, this effect is actually kind of slow to render because of the way it's set up. So what we might want to do is pre-render it. So to do that, we're going to pre-compose it, move all attributes, and we'll call this line animation. And then we'll go into the project, and we have that comp here, and we'll choose Create Proxy Movie. So there's a tutorial on the site called Workflows and Proxies. You might want to check it out. Some cool tips on setting this kind of stuff up, but we're going to set it to best. We just want it to be a pre-rendered movie so that we don't have to wait for it to render. So we'll go ahead and use QuickTime, and for the format, we'll set it to PNG, and that way we can preserve the transparency by using the RGB plus alpha. And then go ahead and save your file and hit render. Okay, so that's done rendering, and it took 2 minutes. Now that's 2 minutes we're not going to have to deal with anymore. So if we look in our project, you can see the line animation has a little black box, and that means instead of using the composition, we're actually using the pre-rendered movie in place of it. And you can see the proxy is enabled, and we can scrub through it lightning fast, or race car fast, or even rocket fast. Maybe not rocket fast, but... Back to the main comp, we have most of the elements that we need. Let's go and create our lens flare array. So we'll create a new solid, and we'll make it 250 by 250, and we'll make it black. And then we choose OK. And then effect, generate lens flare. Yes. And we'll just center that up. Now what we want to do is just make a quick animation. So we'll turn the flare brightness down to 0, and we'll move forward 1 second up to 100, and we'll move forward again, turn it down. So if we look at that, it's kind of slow. So let's move it to about that, and then control click so that it kind of pops a little bit better. Let's take a look. So maybe a little quicker. So there we go. We have just sort of a quick animation, and then we're going to pre-compose this. So control pre-compose, Control Shift C, and we'll go ahead and call this flare, and OK. And let's change the transfer mode to screen, and then we're going to duplicate the flare a couple of times. So we'll duplicate it, and then you also want to offset the time, so just kind of shift over the layers a bit, and maybe if we go into the flare, we can shorten the comp, set the work area here, and right click trim comp, and that way the layers are actually shorter. And then we can duplicate the layers, all of them, edit, duplicate, and offset them again. So then it looks, you know, magical. And then we'll take all of the flares, and we'll pre-compose that, and we'll call this flare array. And again, we'll set it to screen, and there we have our little animation. And what we can do is tint it and use a curves adjustment, color correction curves, and, you know, give it some color that we want. Maybe we want it to be blue. So just by playing around with the color channels, we can create the look that we want. And finally, add a simple glow. Okay, we'll go and shut that off for right now. Take the text tool, and we'll type video. That's pretty big. Let's scale that down. And then what we want to do is give it a ramp effect, generate ramp, and we'll color it maybe blue to light blue, and then we'll move these in so that it's a little bit of a shorter animation. Then we're going to go ahead and add a perspective bevel alpha. And this is just going to give us a little bit of a 3D edge, and we'll change the thickness to 1.5 and maybe turn up the intensity a little bit. So that is just going to help sell the edge of this fake 3D effect. And then we're going to duplicate the video layer, Control D, and we'll move the second layer below, and we'll just shut off these effects. And also we want all the layers here to be 3D except for the background layer. And what we want to do is take our second layer. If we go to a custom view, we can see, and we want to go ahead and take our second layer and just move it back in 3D space just a little bit, and then maybe change the color of it to sort of a darker medium bluish color. And we'll go back to the active camera. We'll create a camera, 35mm, and then we'll take the orbit tool and just move to the side so that we can see what this is actually doing. So we'll take that second layer, we'll push it back some more, maybe darken the color of the blue some. That looks good. And then let's make another copy of the video layer, duplicate, and we'll put it below, and we'll back it up again, and this one we're going to make black. So it's a pretty simple setup. We use 3 layers, and if you look at it quickly, you can see that it sort of looks 3D, although the edges are not perfect. But sometimes doing real 3D text, you know, looks better, but you know, it's going to add a whole nother step to your workflow. It's not going to be natively 3D. Of course, there are some workarounds, but they're pretty slow. They're good, but if you don't have the time, you know, it's great to have some cool looking alternatives. Okay, now for the second video, we'll turn that ramp back on, and let's just darken the gradient a little bit. and we'll turn the layer opacity down to 75. So we just hit T and that brings that up. So just play around some more here. So that looks pretty good. Now what I want to do is link the source text of the bottom two back layers and link them to the top layer. So we'll go down to the text, and here we see the source text under text, and we'll bring that up for the top layer as well. Text and source text. And what you're going to do is alt click on the source text and then pick whip the source text of the top layer, and do that for both layers. And now if I change the top layer, so it's kind of a quick way to update the text. Now the other thing I want to do is take the bottom layers and parent it to the top layer also. And that way if I move it around or scale it up, those will also scale up. And I can also lock those layers so that I don't accidentally change them. And then I can only change the top layer. Now before I do that though, I want to actually duplicate all three. Edit, duplicate, move it down, and slide it over. And we'll just move these up to the top here. Change the color so that we can differentiate. And then parent these two to this layer, since this layer is going to be the new source. And we also want to change the expression so that we're looking at this layer instead of the bottom layer. So we can actually just go into the expression. Instead of video 2, change that to video 5, which is this top layer. So just change it from 2 to 5 and 2 to 5. And that way I can take this and type Copilot, click away, and now that updates. Also for the bottom layer, I want this to be gray instead of blue. So we'll just change it just a bit here. Maybe make it lighter. Maybe just a touch of blue. And for the second back layer, we'll go ahead and make it a little bit lighter as well. And push it up a little bit bluer. And then we'll lock the two bottom layers for each of them. And I'm going to scale up video. Let's make it a little bigger. And that is looking good. We'll go ahead and move these over, center them up here. And now let's create our background. So we'll turn on the blocks. And what I want to do is shut the camera off and solo this layer. And a way to make it less blocky is to basically mask out the edges so that it's not a perfect square. So to do that, we're just going to kind of go through here and sort of randomly, remove blocks and add blocks. So it looks a little bit imperfect. And just be careful about the edges because the mosaic filter renders after the mask. So just bring them in. There we go. Also probably want to move these in. Let's see. Okay. So shut that off again, and then we want to unsolo and turn the camera back on. We'll change the transfer mode to color burn and maybe bring the brightness up so that there's only a few blocks. Then we'll duplicate the layer and we'll change the transfer mode to screen, or better yet, we'll change it to color dodge. And if we move that over, we can bring the brightness down, and so it's not as intense, and we'll scale it down. And this is the part where you can just kind of do whatever, but we're going to bring it out front, and then I'm going to duplicate it again, Control D, push it in the background, maybe move it over, maybe even rotate it so that it looks a bit different. We'll duplicate it some more here. Play around with the scale also so that everything kind of looks random, and you have, small detail as well as large detail in our composite. So okay, then we'll turn on our line array and we'll fill it, generate fill with a quick blue color. And we'll add a glow, stylize glow. Okay, we can also duplicate this line, Control D. Now we can also duplicate the line, edit, duplicate, and move it over, scale it down, and maybe rotate it. So we just have a little bit more life in our animation. And maybe even offset the time of it so that it does look different. Now I'm going to go ahead and make one more block layer of the white layer, duplicate it, and I want to put it in front of our title. And this is going to help to sort of obscure some of the, the fact that this isn't real 3D, and turn the opacity down so it's not too obscuring. But so far, that is going to be what our template title is going to look like. Okay, now, what is this tutorial on? SureTarget, right. Let's create a new composition. And we'll call this promo video. And we want to make it the same settings as Comp 3. Choose OK. And I'll just close some of this stuff here. We don't need that. And we'll change the comp settings here. And we'll just make it called Title 1. And in the promo video, I'm going to take Title 1. I'll put it in a folder here. Titles. And I'm going to move Title 1 out into our promo video comp. Now, I want to use a different background. Now, what I want to do is go into the title, copy the background layer, edit, copy, and paste it into the background of this comp. Then go into Title 1, right click on the background, and choose Guide Layer. So you probably don't see it, but click on Guide Layer for this layer, and you can see it has this little icon. Now, what that's going to do is that in this comp, that is not going to render. So when it gets pre-composed, it's not there. So in here, it's just a visual reference. The benefit is then we can get our own background color here. Now you can see all of the design looks messed up because the transfer modes aren't working correctly. What we're going to do is we're going to use the continuous rasterization switch for the title comp. So click that, and what happens is that entire comp now acts as if it's inside of this comp. So as if I were to copy all the layers here and paste them into this comp. It will pay attention to the lights and the cameras in this comp only. So I'm going to create a new camera, 35mm OK, and now with the Orbit camera tool you can see I can fly around this scene as if it were a 3D object of sorts. Now the benefit is then I don't have to have a whole bunch of layers in my one comp, and I can also organize my titles to keep things neat. So I'm going to also create a null object, and we'll call this SureTarget, and I'll parent the camera to that. Come over to the effects and we'll type in SureTarget, and we'll take our SureTarget preset and drop it onto that null object. Now our title 1 is right here. We'll switch to a custom view, and I'm going to duplicate the title, edit, duplicate, and then I'm going to take that title and move it around. But it's still a 2D layer, so I can move it around, but I don't have a lot of control over it. So in order to move the scene around in 3D, we need to make it a 3D layer as well. And that gives us the control to be able to actually move the scene and even rotate the scene just by simply moving that layer around. So I'm going to go ahead and make one more copy, and we'll just move it over here. Now it's a little slow to render obviously because we have a massive comp. So I'm going to go into the title comp, And I'm just going to go ahead and shut off a lot of the layers. And that way, all we see is the text. So, moving this stuff around, we'll go ahead and move this one over here, and maybe move this one down a bit, and maybe back this way, and up. The second one will move, let's say, right about there. This one maybe down a little bit, and over to the right. So, this is the part where you have fun and you move your titles wherever you want. Now, Sure Target. Let's go from this title to this title to this title. So basically we're going from layer 5 to layer 4 to layer 3. Now I know they're all the same, but it'll work for right now. So target 1, we'll go ahead and set that to title 1 on layer 5. Target 2, layer 4. Target 3, layer 3. Now be sure your Sure Target is also a 3D layer. So then hit E, which brings up the effects, and we can keyframe the Sure Target amount. So we'll set a keyframe on 1, that's target 1. We'll move forward 1 second, and we'll set another keyframe. And we'll move forward to 2 seconds, and we'll animate forward to 2. And I've switched from the custom view back to the active camera, and that way I can see what's happening. And then we'll hold on it for 1 second. Set a keyframe up to 4 seconds. We'll set it to 3, and that moves us back to this other title. And you can have as many as you want, but this should be good for right now. I'll go ahead and select them, hit F9 so that it's a smooth animation. And because I'm lazy, I'm just going to go back to that comp we made a little while ago and copy the particles and paste them into this comp. And we'll probably just increase the radius and change the transfer mode to add. Alright, looks good. So here we can go ahead and just play around with the camera animation. So we'll take target 2, let's say, and let's rotate it to the right. And then we'll go to the Sure Target, hit U, and we'll animate from this keyframe to this keyframe our rotation. So hit Shift and then R, keyframe the orientation, move forward, and we want to orient it so that we're looking at it. That looks pretty good. It kind of flies over to it. Also be sure to set it to an easy E, so hit F9. And then set a hold keyframe, and then move forward, and then just be sure to set the animation back to 0 so your other titles are still in sync. Now let's go ahead and finish this video up, add some flavor, and do some of those color changing effects that make it look so nice. So first of all, we have title 1 comp. Let's duplicate that, edit, duplicate, and edit, duplicate. Now the reason we're going to duplicate is now we can go into each of these and change the text. That's why we set it up this way. So Video Copilot presents, the second one will be Sure Target, and then we go into the third one and we can type now available. And we'll just shift that over. So then in the promo video, we can take the second title. So here's the first title, the second title, and take title 2 and hold down Alt and drop it in there with the layer selected, and it will replace it. Then if we take the third title here, grab title 3, hold down Alt, and it will replace it. And so now, Video Copilot, Sure Target, now available. So we're getting somewhere. Let's go ahead and position these so that they look cool when we get to them. So we'll take the first title, Pan Behind tool, and let's just move this over a little bit, maybe rotate the layer so that we can see some of that 3D, and let's just also scale it down just a little bit. So then we go to title 2, and we want this to be kind of big and exciting, so we'll just scale it up a little bit more. And then on to title 3, now available, pan behind tool, shift it over, and also we'll scale this one down. And then when we get to the final one, let's rotate it this way. Now, if we do that, we probably want to go in and adjust the bevel and emboss. So on title 3, let's just move our fake camera over here just a little bit so we can see that. And we'll take that top layer for each of the titles and we'll adjust the bevel alpha position so that the light is more coming from this top direction. So again, just kind of flip it over. And so now it looks a little bit more accurate there. The other thing, let's add the life to the camera. So we'll hit P, alt click on the position, we'll type wiggle 0.25, 250, and that will add a little bit of random life to the position of the camera. Maybe a little bit too much. Let's try 150. Now, one other thing we probably want to do is make sure that the titles in the background aren't visible until we get to them. So hit U to see the keyframes, and then go to the titles, hit T to bring up the opacity, and let's take title 2, turn the opacity down to 0, and what we want to do is fade it in as we transition to it. So set the keyframe here, and then as we approach it, we'll turn it up. So you can play around with how you want that to happen, but basically you just want it to subtly come on to the screen, and then there it is. And as long as it's far away. Now here's an interesting case where it's still in the background, but what if we take our third title, the now available, and what if we just drag it and move it over? And that way we don't have to fade it out, we just simply make it farther away. And that solves that problem, although the movement does lose just a little bit. So let's just move it down, something like that. So that's just one possible solution, is just make the titles further apart, but you're going to have to do some fading in and fading out depending on how big your comp is. Now we'll go ahead into the particles and let's increase the radius so that we can see the particles in the entire frame here, and maybe increase the birth rate again. Okay, now to do some color changes, let's create an adjustment layer. And it's pretty simple. You just add color effects to the adjustment layer, like a tint and maybe a curves adjustment. We'll turn the tint down a little bit and just give it like a really, harsh brightness contrast curve. And, maybe turn the green channel up a little bit. Something like that. Also, I may want to make the particles a little smaller. So let's see. 0.1, 0.1, 0.15. Yeah, it's a little better. So that's basically what we're going to do. This is sort of the dark coloring adjustment layer, and we'll just fade the opacity out as we travel to the next location. So set a keyframe, move forward, and then turn it down. So all that's happening is this adjustment layer is simply fading out as we get to this other title. And then we can make another adjustment layer, and we'll add a little bit different formula, maybe tint, color correction. And the reason that you tint it is that way you can actually change the colors, because if it's already blue, it's hard to shift the colors using the curves adjustment. So let's go for like a bright, orangish color, really in your face. So we'll make a sure target blue, but then when we go to the next one, let's fade on this adjustment layer as the animation moves over. Now available. And we might darken that just a bit. And we can desaturate it by adding another tint below it. Something like that. So it's kind of dark and it brightens up because your day just got better with SureTarget, and then now available. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now to finalize this, what we're going to do is turn on the motion blur for the layers, for most of the layers here. Go into the title comp. Now we need to do this for each individual one since we shut them off. And basically just turn on all this stuff except for the flare array. We'll come back to that. And just go to title 1, title 2, turn the layers back on, and title 3. Now the other thing you want to do is turn on the motion blur. So hit F4, select all the layers, Control A, turn on the motion blur. Turn on the motion blur. Title 1, same thing. Turn on the motion blur. Then if we go to our promo video, turn on the motion blur switch. We'll go half resolution for right now. And we should be able to see some nice animation in between. And let's go ahead and go grab that flare array that we created, copy it, and let's just put it into the promo comp. Turn it on. Now we'll uncheck it as a 3D layer, and we'll just make it on top here. And we'll change the transfer mode to screen. That's good. Now we could probably change the color, maybe to like a redder color, something like that. And let's go ahead and preview what this looks like. Now that's just way too much stuff, but I'll let you guys be the designers. Here we go. Okay, let's check it out. Okay, so as you can see, there's just way too much sparkle going on here, but just spread that apart, and you might want to lower the opacity on a lot of those secondary elements as they're just getting a little bit intense. But anyway, bottom line is you guys can play around with the design to make sure that it looks clean. So as you can see, the SureTarget preset is really going to give you a lot of time to experiment with different things, and because it's so simple and so easy, you're going to have the time to make mistakes and create things that you never would have had time to even think about experimenting with. Well, this has been a pretty long tutorial, and despite what some of you guys think that all I do is record tutorials, well, I have friends. I have real friends, not just internet friends. They come and they visit me all the time. We hang out, Oh, hey, listen, hold on. Oh, hey, what's up, Bobby? No, I'm just recording a tutorial. How you doing? No, don't worry, they can't hear you because I have there's a special, it's like a filter, blocks out the sound. Yeah, talk all you want. Oh, thanks, yeah, I just got it, it's nice. Yeah, it's a brand new shirt, actually. But, anyway, hey, listen, we can talk later. We can have this friendly conversation later because we're friends anytime, right? And I just call you up. I have your number, I'm sure. Yeah, no, I'm due. So I'll call you then. Okay. All right, see you later. See that? That was a real person that just came in here to talk to me. And that proves it. Well, anyway, download the preset, have fun with it. I'm Andrew Kramer with VideoCopilot.net, and of course, be sure to check out the forum, check out the blog, and hey, check out our great DVDs. We have many of them, and they might even help you create some better designs than this. Imagine having some, some cool evolution elements or some riot gear elements kind of coming out of this design as you fly all over 3D space. We'll see you next time. Until then, stop, drop, and roll. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking SureTarget. That kind of sounds like a movie. Maybe an action movie. Maybe an action movie by Steven Seagal. I'm done killing the wrong guy. This time, I'm sure. SureTarget. Right? It's actually not a movie, but my people are in contact with his people. And hopefully we can talk to the people over at Hard Target, and maybe we could come up with a sequel. Jean-Claude Van Damme, he's been out of work for a while, so maybe we could, talk him into something. John Woo. Man. Let's talk about the director choice.